I went to the old graveyard that afternoon just to take a few eerie photos for a Halloween-themed project. It was one of those quiet, forgotten cemeteries with headstones cracked and leaning, half swallowed by overgrown weeds. The kind of place where the silence felt thick, where even the wind moved slow and careful. I wasn't nervous at all when I walked in. It was daylight, after all, and I thought the worst I might deal with would be a snake or a rusty fence. I had no idea that stepping into that graveyard meant something else was about to step out. I wandered deeper inside, weaving between the crooked stones. Most were too weathered to read, names long erased by time, but that only added to the mood I was going for. I found a crumbling mausoleum near the far corner, the kind with vines wrapped around its broken entrance. That's where I decided to take the photo. I lined up the shot, the old structure, the shadows draped across the ground, and the sun dipping just low enough to give the sky a grayish hue. I raised my phone, adjusted the angle, and clicked. The flash fired, even though there was still enough light not to need it, and that's when I felt it. A sharp sensation ran through me, like I was suddenly being watched from behind. Not just watched, loomed over, like someone was standing right behind me, breathing on my neck. My skin went cold in an instant, and every hair on my arms stood up. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. The feeling was so intense, so specific. It was like the air itself had changed around me. I could swear I felt the slight pressure of someone close enough to touch me. I turned around quickly, expecting to find someone, a stranger, a caretaker, even a prankster. But there was nothing. Just empty air, swaying grass, and gravestones. No sound, no breeze, just that awful stillness. I tried to laugh it off, shake my head, pretend it was my imagination. I told myself maybe the wind had shifted, or maybe I was just jumpy from the quiet atmosphere. Still, I left a few minutes later. Something in me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't until I got home that the unease deepened. I opened the gallery to check the photo I'd taken. The mausoleum looked perfect in the frame, but there was something else, a faint blur behind me, a shape. It was barely noticeable at first, but once I zoomed in, the outline became clearer. It looked like a figure, tall, gaunt, shadowed, with no face I could make out. It stood just over my shoulder, directly behind where I had been. The thing was, I had taken the photo alone. I know that. No one else was around. I had checked. So how did that shape appear in the frame? I tried to explain it away. Lens flare, smudge on the camera, some glitch. I took more pictures in the house just to see if it happened again. They were all fine, normal, clear, but something inside me already knew this wasn't a mistake. That moment in the graveyard hadn't been an illusion. I didn't just imagine the breath, the presence. Something was there, and it had been right behind me. The photo was proof. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was just one of those unexplainable things. Weird, sure, but nothing more. I deleted the photo, closed the app, and put the phone down. But that night, as I lay in bed, the feeling returned. That heaviness in the air, that strange cold creeping down my spine. I didn't hear anything. There were no footsteps, no whisper, just the sense of something, the same feeling I had felt in the graveyard. It was like the air in my room wasn't mine anymore. I sat up, heart pounding, looked around. The room was empty. The door was shut. Nothing unusual, but I knew deep in my bones I hadn't come home alone. I had walked out of that graveyard, but something else had walked out with me. It didn't make sense, and I didn't want it to. But it was real. I felt it when I turned out the lights. I felt it standing in the corner of the room where the shadows pooled. I felt it even when I shut my eyes and tried to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to find my bedroom door slightly open, even though I'd locked it the night before. I couldn't prove anything, couldn't explain anything, but I knew that moment in the graveyard was not the end. It was the beginning. And something I never saw clearly had now made sure it could see me. After I returned home from the graveyard, everything felt different. Not just emotionally, physically, tangibly different. The air inside my apartment had changed. It was heavy, cold, and unnaturally still, like the kind of silence that comes right before a thunderstorm. I noticed it the second I walked in. At first, I chalked it up to my nerves, to the eerie experience I'd had earlier and the unsettling photo on my phone. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I needed a hot shower and some sleep to shake it off. That night, I settled in for bed and tried to distract myself with a movie playing in the background. Something light to drown out the feeling I couldn't shake. I kept glancing at the hallway outside my bedroom, which had always felt like just another part of the house, but now seemed darker than usual. I turned off the TV around midnight and left a lamp on, something I never did, then crawled into bed. As I laid there, staring at the ceiling, I tried to ignore the creeping sensation that someone, somewhere in the apartment, was watching me. Around 3 a.m., I heard the first creak. My bedroom door hadn't moved, but the floorboard just outside of it did, that familiar wooden groan that only happened when someone stepped in that exact spot. My heart started racing, but I didn't move. I kept listening. A few seconds passed, and I heard it again. Another slow, careful creak, like someone trying not to be heard. The door remained closed, but I was frozen. I stared at the thin crack beneath it, where just the faintest light from the hallway glowed through. I could swear I saw a shadow shift past. I reached for my phone, hand trembling, but the moment my fingers touched it, the door creaked again, this time just slightly ajar. I held my breath and waited. Nothing else happened. No footsteps, no voice, no movement, just silence. I stayed like that until the sun began to rise, and the room slowly filled with the soft grey light of dawn. When I finally mustered the courage to get up, I opened the door fully and looked out. The hallway was empty, exactly as it should be. But it felt wrong, like the air still hadn't settled from whoever or whatever had moved through it. In the days that followed, the small disturbances became more frequent. The bathroom door would swing slightly open when I was sure I'd shut it. Tight cabinet doors in the kitchen would be ajar in the morning. My keys, always left on the hallway table, would be on the floor instead. Each event was small, almost dismissible, but they built on each other like steps in a slow descent. What made it worse was that the house no longer felt like mine. It was as if the very walls were aware of me, breathing with me, surrounding me not as shelter, but as a trap. The temperature in the apartment stayed cold, even when I turned off the air conditioning and kept the windows shut. I could see my breath some mornings. I bought a thermometer just to be sure, and it read 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Far too low for the inside of an apartment with no airflow. There were no drafts, no broken windows, no explanation. And every night, at the same time, always between 2:30 and 3 o'clock, a.m., the same creaking sound would return. Not hurried footsteps, but the slow, deliberate sound of someone moving through the dark, just outside my bedroom door. It got to the point where I started keeping a chair pushed up against the doorknob. It didn't stop the creaking. Sometimes I would hear scratching on the walls, faint and rhythmic, like nails being dragged just gently enough to be heard. It would last for a minute, then stop. One night, I recorded it with my phone, and when I played it back, there was a whisper in the background, so faint I almost didn't catch it. But once I did, I couldn't unhear it. A voice, low and calm, saying, "You see me now." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat on the bed with the light on, watching the door, listening. Nothing happened, and that was worse, because I knew, without any doubt, that something was on the other side. Something that didn't need to knock, or break in, or show itself. It was already here. It had followed me home from the graveyard, and now it was inside, moving through my space like it belonged there more than I did. I didn't know what it wanted, or what I had done to deserve its attention, but I knew this. It wasn't going away. It started with my phone acting strange, little things at first that I tried to ignore. My screen would flicker occasionally, or apps would close without warning. I figured it was just a bug, or that my phone needed an update. But then, photos started showing up in my gallery that I hadn't taken. The first time it happened, I assumed I had accidentally pressed the shutter button while the phone was in my pocket. The image was dark and blurry, like a shot taken while the phone was moving, so it didn't concern me much. But the next few were different, too different. There were photos of my bedroom, taken from strange angles, like from the top corner of the room, as if the camera was floating. One image was from the hallway outside my room, and I remember being inside, behind a locked door, when it was supposedly taken. I started to panic, thinking maybe someone had hacked into my phone, or worse, someone was actually in my house taking these photos while I was sleeping. I searched every room, checked the windows and doors for signs of forced entry, but found nothing. My place was exactly as I had left it, and yet the photos kept appearing. What scared me more was the progression. The images became clearer over time, more focused, less distorted, and then the faces started to appear. At first, they were blurry and shadowy, just vague human-like shapes. I thought they could be tricks of the light or motion blur, but each new photo showed the same face bell, emotionless and familiar. It wasn't someone I knew personally, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. The face looked like mine, but not quite. It was a distorted version, with a twisted expression and wide, unnatural smile. The eyes were hollow, too dark, and felt like they were staring right at me. One night, I deleted every photo from my phone, including the ones I had taken myself. I cleared the gallery, restarted the device, and even changed my passwords. I felt a brief moment of relief, thinking I had taken back control. But the next morning, my gallery was full again. Not only were the same images back, but they had multiplied, and now the face was closer. In one photo, it was in my bed, lying beside me. In another, it was standing behind me while I brushed my teeth, staring into the mirror. My hands trembled as I scrolled through them. It didn't feel like a phone glitch. Anymore, it felt like surveillance, like I was being watched at all times. I tried showing the photos to a friend, but the moment I handed over my phone, the gallery appeared empty. My friend looked at me with concern, probably thinking I was imagining things or playing a prank. When I took the phone back, the images were all there again. That was the most terrifying part. It knew when it was being watched by others, and it chose to hide. I was the only one allowed to see it, the only one being targeted. and that realization isolated me more than anything else. After that, I stopped using my phone at night. I would turn it off and leave it in another room before going to bed, but the photos still kept coming. Somehow, even with the device powered off, new images would appear by morning. I even bought a new phone, thinking I could escape it. But the very first time I turned on the new device and connected it to my email, the gallery filled up again. It was never about the phone, it was about me. Whatever this was had attached itself to me, and it was using technology to make sure I knew it. The worst image came 2 nights later. I had been tossing and turning in my bed, unable to sleep, the air around me thick with anxiety. At around 3 a.m., I heard a whisper in the room, but when I sat up, it was silent again. The next morning, I found one new photo waiting for me. This time, it was taken from just inches away from my face while I slept. The angle was too perfect, too intimate, and standing in the background was the distorted version of me, closer than ever, with that twisted grin stretching impossibly wide. Its eyes, still hollow, had started to glow faintly. The face wasn't just watching anymore, it was waiting. I didn't know what it wanted, and I didn't know how to stop it. I stopped using my phone entirely, left it off for days, locked it away in a drawer. But the images somehow made their way to my laptop, and even my backup drives. It was spreading. There was no safe screen anymore. Every reflection, every lens, felt like a window it could use. I started covering mirrors, turning off security cameras, avoiding anything that could capture my image. Because every time I saw my own face, I worried it wouldn't be mine anymore. I needed to get away. I thought if I left town, if I put enough miles between myself and whatever had followed me, I could finally breathe again. The graveyard had been days ago, and my home no longer felt like a place of safety. It felt watched, disturbed, violated. The shadows moved when they shouldn't. The temperature dropped no matter how many blankets I used. I'd begun to hear my name whispered in the dead of night, low and cold, coming from places no one should be. So I packed a bag, booked a last-minute hotel in another city, and left before sunrise. Never looking back. The hotel room was simple, clean bed, old carpet, quiet. No creaky floors or flickering lights. It was the kind of boring normal I desperately needed. I left the lights on, unpacked, and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to convince myself I was safe now, far away from whatever energy I'd disturbed. I even slept early that night, for the first time in what felt like forever. But sometime after midnight, I woke up without knowing why. I sat up, breath shallow, heart racing. The room felt off. Not cold, just heavy, like someone had filled the air with invisible weight. That's when I noticed it. The bathroom mirror was fogged, even though I hadn't used the shower. I got up, slowly walking toward it, confused. As I neared the door, I noticed something more unsettling. There were fingerprints on the glass lot, smeared ones, as though someone had dragged their hand down the center. I froze. I hadn't touched the mirror. I hadn't even opened that door since checking in. The realization made my skin crawl. I backed away, heart pounding in my throat, when the whisper came again. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even clear, but it was unmistakably my name drawn out slowly, almost affectionately. I turned in circles, scanning every inch of the room, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, the windows locked, the door chained, and still the whisper came again, softer this time, like it was inside my head. I knew right then it hadn't stayed behind. It wasn't tied to the place. It had latched onto me. Wherever I went, it would follow. It had already made that decision. The moment I looked into that grave through the camera lens, the next day, I tried to deny it again. I went to a cafe, surrounded myself with people, laughed at the absurdity of it all. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I needed therapy, sleep, food. But as I sipped my coffee and glanced at the cafe window, I saw it, a reflection. Mine, but not mine. It stood directly behind me in the glass, watching me, grinning slightly, its eyes too dark, its head tilted just enough to make the posture feel inhuman. I spun around instantly, but no one was there. The cafe continued on as normal. People chatting, coffee machines humming, but I was no longer part of that normal. That night, I slept with every light on. I laid in bed gripping the hotel phone, ready to call the front desk at the slightest sign of movement. At 2:43 a.m., the mirror fogged again. I hadn't moved. The bathroom door was shut, the air conditioner was off. Still, condensation crept down the glass, and again, the long, dragging fingers left marks. Then came the sound scraping, as if something was crawling just above the ceiling, or worse, in the walls. It circled slowly, deliberately. I pressed the pillow against my ears, but I could still feel its weight, its presence, like it was waiting for me to open my eyes. By morning, the hotel staff looked at me with concern. I must have looked terrible, sunken eyes, trembling hands. I asked to switch rooms. They agreed. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would make a difference. New walls, new bed, a fresh start, however brief. But the first time I turned on the TV in the new room, static filled the screen, and through the fuzz, I heard my name again. Loud this time. Angry, not whispered like before. This was a warning. I had run, and it was done playing games, I thought. Back to what the old man near the graveyard had said, the one who passed me as I was leaving that first day. He'd muttered something so soft I hadn't listened. I remembered now. If it sees you, it owns you. Maybe I had locked eyes with something in that cemetery, something bound to darkness and memory. Maybe it didn't need rituals or permission. Just attention, just a look. And now, it wasn't haunting a place. It was haunting a person, me. That night was the worst of all. I had already accepted that whatever had attached itself to me was no longer tied to any physical place. It followed me from the graveyard, moved with me from room to room, whispering, shifting shadows, pressing, cold into my skin. But that night, something changed. It wasn't content with being unseen anymore. It wanted to show me it was here, not just through noises or reflections, but through direct, undeniable evidence. It didn't care if I ran, ignored it, or begged for it to stop. It had become bolder, and I could feel it inching closer. I fell, asleep with the lights on again, the TV buzzing faintly in the background to drown out the silence. I had grown used to the idea that I wasn't alone. But around 3:17 a.m., I woke up choking, not coughing or gasping like during a nightmare, but choking. My mouth was filled with something thick and gritty. I stumbled out of bed, coughing into my hands, and when I looked down, I saw dirt, dark, wet soil. It was on my hands, my sheets, my floor. It coated the back of my throat like something had stuffed it in while I slept. I scrambled to the bathroom and spit the rest into the sink, shaking uncontrollably. My reflection looked pale, wide-eyed, and broken. Then I saw them muddy footprints trailing across the floor. They led from the door to the side of my bed, then disappeared. Not away from the bed, toward it. They had stopped there, right where I had been lying. The shape of the feet was disturbing. They were bare, long-toed, too narrow to be human. And the mud wasn't dry, it was still damp, as if the thing that left them had only just left the room. Or worse, hadn't left at all. I stood frozen, staring at the tracks, too afraid to follow them or even clean them up. They stayed there for hours. Even as the sun rose and light crept into the room, the footprints remained wet, as though preserved in time. And I realized something terrible. It wasn't just watching me. It had touched me. It had been close enough to fill my mouth with soil, to walk across my floor, to stand at the edge of my bed while I slept, helpless and unaware. That entire day, I refused to sleep. I left the apartment, wandered aimlessly, tried to lose myself in public places with noise and light and people, but I couldn't escape the feeling. I could still feel the dirt in my lungs, the pressure on my chest, the cold breath brushing my face. It was always just behind me, like an echo of something I couldn't see but could always feel. Every time I turned around quickly, I expected to catch a glimpse. Sometimes, in the corner of my vision, I thought I did. I tried speaking to it. I thought maybe, if it wanted attention, acknowledgement, it would stop if I gave it what it wanted. I asked what it wanted. I screamed. I whispered. I pleaded. No response, nothing but the soft scrape of something moving along my walls at night. That night, I placed flour on the floor before bed, across the entrance of my room and at the foot of the bed. I wanted proof, something physical, to either confirm or disprove what I feared. I didn't sleep, just laid in bed, heart pounding, waiting. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard it again, the slow, deliberate creaking of the floorboards. The air grew cold, and the temperature dropped like someone had opened a freezer in the middle of the room. I stayed still, barely breathing. Minutes passed in silence before the sound faded. At sunrise, I finally got up and checked the flour. There were prints against one set, leading up to the foot of my bed. But this time, there were no exit prints. It had come in, but it hadn't left. It was still here. Now, I sleep with every light on, every door open, every window locked. But none of it helps. I can still hear the faint dragging sound in the walls. I can still feel that suffocating heaviness the moment night falls. It waits until I'm half asleep, vulnerable, and then it comes closer. I used to think the graveyard was haunted, but now I think it was more than that. I think something inside it had been waiting for years, maybe centuries, for someone to see it, to bring it out. And now that it's free, it doesn't want to be alone anymore.